I don't know what finally made me say it. Maybe it was the way she turned away from me in bed for the 100th night in a row. Maybe it was the fact that I could name every curve of her body, and yet I hadn't touched a single one in 3 months. Or maybe it was just the fact that I couldn't take pretending anymore, that going through the motions had finally become harder than just telling the truth. We were brushing our teeth. That's when it happened. Not during a fight. Not after sex. Not during one of those deep heart-to-hearts we used to have when we still made space for honesty. No, we were standing side by side, silently, in front of the bathroom mirror like strangers in a hotel room, and the words just spilled out. You haven't touched me in months. She didn't even flinch. I remember watching her spit into the sink, wipe her mouth, and toss the towel onto the hook with casual precision. Then she finally looked at me in the mirror. Cool, unreadable. That look used to turn me on, back when mystery felt sexy. Now it just felt like distance wearing makeup. You're being dramatic, she said, voice flat. Don't make this into something it's not. I leaned on the counter, the sink cold against my hands. I kept my voice steady, even though something in my chest was already breaking loose. I'm not making anything up. We haven't had sex in, what, 11 weeks? And it's not just that. You barely look at me anymore. You haven't kissed me. You barely even touch me, Dana. Not out of affection, not even out of habit. She was quiet for a second too long. Then she sighed, like I was being exhausting. Like my pain was an inconvenience. Passion fades. That's how long-term relationships work. You think every married couple is screwing like teenagers after 17 years? I felt my jaw clench. This isn't about screwing like teenagers. This is about us. About how you don't seem to want me anymore. You move away when I touch you. You flinch if I kiss your shoulder. I sleep next to you every night, and it's like we're miles apart. She shook her head. You're twisting things. Am I? I asked. I turned to face her fully now. So tell me, do you still want me? The question hung in the air like a flare, burning hot and bright and undeniable. That's when she snapped. If you're that desperate, she said, her eyes cold, then be with someone else. The words hit me harder than I expected. Not because of what she said, but because of how easily she said it. No hesitation. No regret. Not even a tremor in her voice. Be with someone else. There was a time when that sentence would have ended a marriage. Now she said it like she was handing me a hall pass. Like I was a problem she didn't want to solve, just redirect. I stared at her. She stared right back. And that was it. No yelling. No storming out. No tears. Just silence. The kind that wraps around a house like a fog, seeping in through the cracks, filling the spaces that used to be warm with something colder. I walked out of the bathroom and sat at the edge of the bed. She didn't follow. Didn't say another word. Just turned off the light on her side and slid under the covers without even facing me. And the thing that kept echoing in my mind wasn't the fight. It wasn't the months of rejection. It wasn't even the loneliness. It was her voice, steady, indifferent, saying, then be with someone else. She meant it. Or at least, she didn't care enough not to. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, her words repeating in my head like a dare I hadn't agreed to take. And that was the moment I realized something worse than anger had crept into our marriage. Indifference. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's nothing. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was replaying what she said, but because I was starting to wonder what would happen if I took her advice. The house felt too quiet the next morning. Not the peaceful kind of quiet you get when everyone's still asleep and the coffee maker hums its first breath of the day. No, this was something different, something heavier. Like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Dana was already downstairs when I got up. She didn't wait for me in bed. No surprise there. I showered, shaved, dressed in silence. Habit, I guess. When I passed the mirror, I caught a glimpse of myself, shirt wrinkled, eyes a little sunken, like I hadn't slept. Because I hadn't. She was sipping coffee at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone. No good morning. No eye contact. Just scrolling. I made my own cup, kept the clatter of the spoon against the mug quieter than usual. It felt like even the sound of stirring might break something. I sat down across from her, not really sure why. Maybe just to see if she'd look up. She didn't. I studied her hands instead. Still wore her wedding ring. French tips, clean and polished. She always kept herself put together. Every detail of her was planned. Meanwhile, I was sitting across from her wondering if I even existed in her world anymore. When the silence became unbearable, I cleared my throat. She didn't flinch. I'm not trying to start another fight, I said softly. Still nothing. I leaned forward a little, keeping my voice low. I just need to know if we're okay. Or if that's even something we're trying to be anymore. She finally looked at me then, but her eyes were unreadable. Flat, like glass you can see through, but never quite into. I don't know what you want me to say, Jack. My name. Cold and formal, like it belonged on a document. I want you to want me, I said, not even trying to dress it up. She sighed, long and slow, like I was a question she'd already answered too many times. Relationships change. People evolve. Maybe we just grew out of what we were. And into what? I asked, forcing a bitter laugh. Roommates. Dana didn't answer. She just took another sip of coffee and stood up. Do you want me to move out? I asked. She paused. Her back was to me. I watched her shoulders stiffen. I didn't say that. You didn't say anything. She turned then, and for the first time in a long time, she actually looked angry, not just indifferent. I'm tired, Jack. I'm tired of carrying this weight every day, of you needing something I don't know how to give anymore. I stood up too, not to match her tone, just because I couldn't sit anymore. So that's it. You're just done? No, she said. I'm just numb. The word hit harder than I expected. Numb. Not angry. Not hurt. Not betrayed. Just gone. She grabbed her keys from the counter, slid her sunglasses on like armor, and walked out the door without another word. The silence she left behind was even worse. I spent the rest of the day pretending to be busy. Did a load of laundry I didn't care about. Opened emails I didn't read. Answered calls with a voice I didn't recognize. I moved through the house like a guest in someone else's home. She came back around 6. Didn't say where she'd been. I didn't ask. We passed each other in the hallway like strangers. She microwaved dinner. I ate leftovers. We didn't eat together. Later, when she went to bed, I followed. Not out of hope, but because I didn't know what else to do. She slipped under the covers without turning toward me. Her back was the shape of her silence. I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling. No words. No touch. No anger. Just space. That was worse than any shouting match. Worse than slammed doors or thrown glasses. Because at least those things meant someone still cared enough to hurt you. This was just absence with a heartbeat. I reached out once, just my fingers, brushing her back. Not insistently, just hoping. She didn't move, didn't lean into it, didn't flinch. Nothing. I pulled my hand away like it had been burned, and turned onto my own side, facing the wall. Her breathing was slow, steady, asleep or pretending. Either way, she wasn't coming back across that bed. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. And I realized then, with a kind of cold clarity, that loneliness doesn't always come from being alone. Sometimes it comes from lying 6 inches away from someone who used to love you, and realizing they're already gone. The worst part? I couldn't even cry. There was a dull ache inside me, but no sharp edges. Like even my feelings had grown numb, infected by hers. And somewhere in the stillness, I remembered her words again. Not the fight, just the end of it. If you're that desperate, be with someone else. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't even a threat. It was permission. And the worst part? It still hung in the air, hours later, undeniably real. The envelope sat on the counter for 2 days before I opened it. It arrived with a handful of junk mail, one of those pale blue cards with a scenic lake photo on the front. I recognized it instantly. Dana's family sent the same type every year. The Hawthorne summer trip, scrawled in calligraphy across the front, like a wedding invitation for people who didn't like each other all that much anymore. I wasn't sure why I opened it. Habit, maybe. Or maybe I needed to see if anyone still considered me part of the family. Inside was the same glossy cardstock, the same carefully curated itinerary, fishing, paddle boarding, campfires, board games in the rec room. The Hawthorns were all about tradition. They hosted the week-long lake house trip every summer. A family property upstate, passed down for 3 generations, nestled against a lake that looked straight out of a catalog. The card listed the dates. Early July. Dana's mother had even added a personal note at the bottom, in her usual looped handwriting. Hope you both can make it this year. It's been too long. That was her way of pretending everything was fine. I set the invitation on the kitchen table where Dana would see it. She never brought it up. Never asked if we were going. Never RSVP'd either. 3 days later, she told me she had a work conference that overlapped with the trip. I might come up later in the week, she said. eyes on her laptop. But you should go. It'd be weird if we didn't have anyone representing us. Us. Like we were still a team. So I packed a bag. Not for both of us. Just for me. I didn't tell anyone else she wasn't coming. Maybe because I didn't want to answer questions I didn't have the strength to lie through. Or maybe I just wanted to see who noticed. The drive up took 4 hours. I passed stretches of pine trees and old farmhouses, watched the landscape shift into something softer, quieter. By the time I pulled into the long gravel driveway that snaked through the woods, the air had already changed. Warmer, greener, touched with that distant scent of lake water and wood smoke. Her car was already there. That was the first thing I noticed. I didn't even know she was coming this year. I stepped out of the car and stretched, my back cracking from the long drive. From down near the dock, I heard laughter, light, unfiltered, familiar. Then I saw her, barefoot, walking along the wooden planks with a towel slung over one shoulder. Loose hair, wind-tossed, skin kissed red from the sun, especially on her shoulders where her swimsuit had clearly given up the fight hours ago. Her shorts were frayed, her tank top damp with lake water. She looked like every summer memory I thought I'd forgotten. Leah, Dana's cousin, or maybe second cousin. I could never quite keep the family tree straight. Younger than us by about 6 years, I think, closer to my brother-in-law's age. But old enough now that she didn't look like the kid who used to do cannonballs off the dock. When she spotted me, her face lit up with recognition. She broke into a run, bare feet slapping the dock, arms wide. And before I could brace myself, she threw them around my neck and hugged me like I was someone worth missing. Jack, you came. I nodded, her scent, a mix of lake and sunblock, curling into my head like a wave of nostalgia. I hadn't been hugged like that in a long time. She pulled back, but didn't let go right away. Her hands rested on my shoulders a moment longer than necessary. You didn't tell me you were coming, I said, trying to keep my voice light. She grinned. I didn't know I was, until 2 days ago. My plans fell through, so I thought, why not? It's been forever. She tilted her head, really looking at me now. Something flickered in her gaze. Concern? Curiosity? Then softly, almost too gently. Are you okay? I should have lied. I should have said something casual. A joke. Something about traffic or work or needing a break. But the way she asked it, so direct, so unfiltered, it cracked something in me. I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. She didn't push, just slipped her arm through mine and started walking toward the house like we'd already said everything we needed to. The others were inside, the usual cousins and siblings and family friends. Someone was making burgers. Someone else had a country playlist going on the speaker. Nobody asked where Dana was right away, and I didn't offer. Leah stayed close. Not clingy, not obvious, just nearby. She moved like someone who understood silence, who didn't try to fill every gap with noise. She handed me a beer without asking if I wanted one. She asked about my job, but didn't dig. She teased me gently about my gray hairs, and I surprised myself by laughing. When the sun started to dip, people drifted outside for dinner. I took a seat at one of the long picnic tables and felt the weight of an empty chair beside me. Dana's chair. Leah slid into it without hesitation. She didn't pretend to replace anyone. She just filled the space. At one point, I felt her bare knee brush against mine under the table. I told myself it was an accident. She didn't move it. I didn't either. Later, as the fire pit crackled and conversation turned into background noise, I caught her watching me across the flames. Her eyes met mine, and held. Something unspoken passed between us. Not a promise, not even a question, just a shift. A thread pulled loose in the fabric of the night, tugging something closer. I looked away first, but I felt her gaze linger. We didn't plan to be alone. It just happened. Dinner dissolved into small groups drifting off, someone looking for firewood, someone else heading down to the dock with beers. I ended up on the porch steps with Leah. The lake stretched out in front of us like a dark mirror catching the last of the sunset. She sat one step below me, knees pulled to her chest, arms looped loosely around them. Close enough that I could feel the heat from her skin. Close enough that when she shifted, her shoulder brushed my thigh. Neither of us commented on it. The night hummed with cicadas and distant laughter. A screen door creaked somewhere behind us. The world felt oddly suspended, like it was waiting for something to be said. You don't look okay, she said again, quietly this time. I exhaled through my nose. You already asked me that. I know, she replied. But you didn't answer. I watched the lake instead of her. The water was calm, reflecting a ribbon of fading orange from the sky. I rubbed my thumb against my palm, grounding myself. I didn't plan to tell anyone, I said. She didn't say then don't. She didn't say you don't have to. She just nodded once, like she was bracing herself. Dana and I haven't been close. I started, then stopped. The word felt like a lie. That's not accurate. Leah stayed silent. We haven't had sex in months, I said. The truth landed between us, heavy but clean. Not a dry spell. Not stress. Nothing. No touching. No kissing. Not even the casual stuff. Her head tilted slightly, brows drawing together. Not shock, just concern. I kept telling myself it was temporary. I continued. That marriage goes through phases. That wanting someone that much after this long was unrealistic. I laughed once, bitter. Turns out wanting to be touched isn't unrealistic. It's just human. Leah shifted, turning toward me fully now. Her knee brushed my thigh again, this time unmistakably intentional. Still innocent. Still charged. What happened? She asked. I swallowed. My throat felt tight, but once I started, the words came faster. I finally said something. Told her how lonely I felt. Asked her if she still wanted me. I shook my head. She told me if I was that desperate, I should be with someone else. Leah's lips parted slightly. Her breath caught. She said that, she asked. I nodded. Just like that. No anger. No fight. Like she was bored of the conversation. That's, Leah paused, searching for the right word. Cruel. She says passion fades. I said. That this is just what long-term relationships turn into. But it doesn't feel faded. It feels abandoned. Leah's hand moved without ceremony. She rested it on my forearm, warm and solid. Not sexual. Not cautious either. Just there. I looked down at it, then up at her face. The firelight softened her features, caught in her eyes. She wasn't looking at me like someone hearing gossip. She was looking at me like someone witnessing something vulnerable. I didn't ask for permission to cheat, I said quietly. I asked if my wife still wanted me, and she told me to go somewhere else. Leah shook her head slowly. That would break anyone. The words hit me harder than Dana's ever had. Because Leah said them like they mattered. Like I mattered. I felt my chest tighten, emotion pressing dangerously close to the surface. I hadn't cried in years, not even during the worst fights. But right then, the urge was sharp and sudden. Leah squeezed my arm gently, grounding me. You know, she said, voice low, being wanted isn't some luxury. It's not selfish. It's not shallow. Her thumb brushed lightly against my skin, just once. I felt it everywhere. When someone cuts that off completely, she continued, it messes with your sense of worth. Your body. Your head. I let out a shaky breath. I've started wondering if something's wrong with me. Her eyes snapped to mine. No. The firmness in her voice startled me. No, she repeated. There's nothing wrong with you. We sat like that for a moment, the night wrapping around us. I could feel her closeness now, not just physically, but emotionally. Like she'd stepped into a space no one had occupied for a long time. You don't have to decide anything here, she said softly. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. I nodded, grateful, and yet aware of the pull between us, quiet but undeniable. Her hand lingered on my arm a second longer before she let it fall back to her lap. But the warmth stayed. And as we stood to head back inside, her fingers brushed mine. Accidental. Maybe. Neither of us pulled away. It started small. A touch on the arm. A shared glance over coffee. A laugh that lingered just a bit too long before drifting into silence. The next day, the rhythm of the lake house settled in. Early mornings with the sound of loons on the water. Lazy breakfasts where everyone wandered in half-dressed, still blinking the sleep from their eyes. Canoes scraping the dock. Wet footprints across hardwood. Everything soft and slow, like summer knew how to give us space. Leah and I naturally drifted toward each other again. Not because of effort. Not because of intention. Because when something is aching inside you, it leans toward warmth without thinking. We ended up on dish duty together after lunch. The others had gone outside, following the sun, leaving the kitchen still humming with the scent of grilled vegetables and lemon. Leah rolled up her sleeves and stood beside me at the sink, sleeves wet, hair tied up in a loose knot that revealed the curve of her neck. I washed. She dried. Our arms bumped once, then again. No apologies. Just quiet acknowledgement. Is Dana still coming up later in the week? she asked, her voice even but careful. I hesitated. I don't know. Do you want her to? I paused with my hands in the water, fingers motionless beneath the surface. I don't know that either. Leah nodded like she understood. I wanted to ask if she'd been through something similar, if she had ever been untouched so long that she forgot what her own skin felt like. But I didn't. I was too afraid of how easily the answer might come. When we finished, she tossed the dish towel over her shoulder and leaned back against the counter, watching me with a soft expression. Not pity. Something warmer. Something closer to patience. Want to help me prep dinner later? She asked. Sure, I said. The day moved forward. Canoes went out. Sunscreen was reapplied. I found myself saying yes to everything. Walking the trail with my nephews. Throwing a football on the back lawn. Even helping dig out the old badminton net from the shed. But my eyes kept finding Leah. She sat on the dock with her legs folded underneath her, scribbling in a notebook. She floated on an inflatable ring, eyes closed to the sky. She laughed at a joke someone else made and tilted her head back, throat exposed, light catching the freckles across her collarbone. And I kept noticing the way her tank top clung to damp skin, the way her shorts rode just a little higher when she sat cross-legged, the way she didn't flinch from closeness. Later, in the kitchen, the group buzzed around us, but we moved in sync, chopping, stirring, tasting. Every time I reached across her, my arm brushed hers. Every time she leaned near to whisper something over the sound of conversation, her breath tickled the side of my neck. There was a moment, quiet, hidden in plain sight, where she turned and reached for the salt and her hand grazed my lower back. She didn't apologize, and I didn't pretend I didn't feel it. Our eyes met. Nothing was said, but everything changed. Dinner came and went. Fireflies blinked outside the windows. A few people wandered down to the dock again, and someone called out that the paddle boards were free. Leah and I both moved toward the door at the same time. Walk with me, she asked. We left the house without fanfare, barefoot down the wooden steps. The boards sat at the edge of the dock, tethered and swaying gently. But we didn't take them. We sat side by side on the edge instead, our feet dangling just above the water. The sky was turning indigo, stars barely beginning to blink awake. There was a warmth in the air that didn't come from the sun anymore. She didn't speak at first. Neither did I. Then, as if her body made the decision before her mind caught up, she reached over and rested her hand on my arm again. This time it stayed longer. Her thumb moved slowly. Just a small, absent stroke of skin on skin. I turned my arm, just enough to let her fingers slip lower. She let them. We said nothing. We didn't have to. Her touch wasn't an accident now. It wasn't a comfort. It wasn't a friend's hand offering reassurance. It was something more. My body responded immediately, like it had been waiting for exactly this. Blood warming, chest tightening, every nerve under my skin remembering what it felt like to be wanted. She turned toward me, close enough that I could feel her breath on my cheek. You okay? She asked again, but softer this time, like the words weren't meant to land, only linger. I nodded, but only barely. Her hand slid up my arm. Not rushed, not uncertain, just familiar now, as if she knew exactly where it belonged. I looked at her. Her face was open, eyes calm, lips parted ever so slightly, like she was waiting but not pushing. I didn't kiss her. Not yet. But I thought about it. Hard. Instead, I rested my hand gently on her thigh. The bare skin above her knee was warm from the day, soft under my palm. She didn't move away. If anything, she leaned closer. A breeze passed over us, but neither of us shivered. We stayed like that until someone called our names from the porch, breaking whatever spell had wrapped around us. We stood up slowly, reluctant. Her hand brushed mine again as we walked back to the house, and this time, we didn't pull apart. Not once. It started with a joke. One of Dana's uncles brought up how the cousins used to sneak down to the lake after midnight when they were younger, skinny dipping and drinking warm beer from hidden coolers. Someone groaned. Someone else laughed and said they'd never admit to what happened on the dock that one 4th of July. A few people clinked bottles and vanished into memory, the conversation drifting elsewhere, but Leah caught my eye from across the fire pit and smiled. That kind of smile that holds a dare behind it. Later, after the others had peeled off one by one to their rooms or couches or hammocks, she found me again. I was standing at the back railing, beer in hand, the fire behind me nothing but faint crackles. They weren't wrong about the lake at night. she said, slipping beside me. It was always the best part of summer. I looked at her, the way her hoodie hung off one shoulder, loose and soft, and just barely hiding the outline of something more beneath. Her legs were bare, her hair pulled up like earlier, a few strands fallen loose around her face. She didn't look like someone reminiscing. She looked like someone returning. "You ever go?" she asked, tilting her chin toward the dock. "When I was younger," I said. "But not recently." "Shame," she murmured, then turned toward the stairs without waiting. I followed. The air had cooled, but the warmth still clung to the earth in pockets, on the wood, in the grass, in the brief spaces between steps where our hands brushed as we walked. The lake stretched out dark and still, a mirror of stars and nothing else. The dock creaked under our bare feet. We stopped at the edge. Leah glanced back at me, her eyes wide and reflective in the moonlight. And without a word, she tugged her hoodie over her head. No hesitation. Just skin, smooth and lit by the night. A simple cotton bra, dark panties riding low on her hips. Her tan lines were stark. Her body confident. Unapologetic. She hooked her thumbs into the waistband of her underwear, looked at me again, then dropped them, and walked straight into the lake. I stood there stunned, watching the water ripple around her as she stepped deeper, then finally pushed off and floated, bare and quiet, a silhouette among stars. She didn't look back. She didn't have to. I hesitated for maybe 3 heartbeats, then pulled my shirt over my head, tossed it to the dock. My shorts followed. My boxers were last, dropped in a clumsy pile beside hers. The air kissed every inch of skin as I stepped into the water. Cold at first, sharp, shocking, but then it swallowed me. Smooth, clean, quiet. I swam toward her, not touching, not speaking, just the sound of breath and movement. Her body was only a shape in the moonlight, maybe 10 feet away. Close. Far. Somehow both. The lake was velvet around us. "You always this brave?" I asked, voice low. She smiled. "Only when someone follows." We floated for a while, letting the silence fill what words would have broken. The lake held us. Suspended. No gravity. No pressure. No history. Just the hum of insects on the shore and our soft breaths in the dark. Then, her hand brushed mine under the water. I didn't move. She did it again, this time more intentional. Just fingertips. Just barely there. I turned toward her. She was close now. Close enough I could make out the way her wet hair clung to her cheek, the curve of her collarbone, the rise and fall of her chest just above the waterline. But still, we didn't touch anything else. Not yet. It was all waiting. There was something sacred in the space between us. The way our hands moved closer. The way we floated without speaking, knowing. Then her fingers slipped between mine. No tension. No rush. Just skin. I felt her thumb stroke the side of my hand, and my entire body remembered wanting. Not just being wanted. Wanting. I closed my eyes. She was real. This was real. Not a fantasy. Not a drunken mistake. Not a desperate rebound. Just 2 bodies, bare in the dark, suspended in water and breath, and a connection neither of us had planned. We stayed like that for a long time. Hands. Water. Breath. Nothing else. Eventually, she whispered, "I'm getting cold." It wasn't a dismissal. It was an invitation. We swam back together, silently. Climbed up the ladder one after the other, shivering slightly now in the night air. She grabbed one of the towels from the dock box and tossed me another. We wrapped ourselves, dripping and warm beneath the terry cloth. Her towel hung low on her hips. Mine barely held across my waist. We stood there, face to face, water trailing down our legs, hair clinging to our skin. She leaned in first. Not a kiss. Not yet. Just her forehead against mine. Her breath against my lips. And then, a smile. She turned and walked toward the house, towel loose, one hand trailing behind her. Not offering. Not demanding. Just open. I watched her walk the dock, the curve of her spine, the moonlight on her shoulders, the way she didn't look back. She didn't have to. I followed. And the whole time, I knew. There was no going back. The house was dark when we stepped inside. Only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the old floorboards beneath our feet broke the silence. Everyone else had gone to sleep. Rooms closed, lights off. The lake behind us stilled into memory. Leah walked ahead of me, her towel loose around her body, clinging in places it shouldn't. The curve of her hip peeked out as she turned toward the hallway, glancing over her shoulder to make sure I was still there. I was. I followed her without a word. The guest room she was using was at the far end of the hall, one of the ones that still had bunk beds and mismatched blankets from when all the cousins were kids. A fan spun slowly overhead, stirring the humid air into something breathable. She stepped inside first, then turned and leaned against the doorframe, facing me. We stood there like that, barely 2 feet between us, towels clutched but slipping, hearts hammering with the kind of rhythm that no silence can smother. "Jack," she said softly, her voice half-breath, "we don't have to do anything." I reached up, brushing a wet strand of hair from her cheek. "I know." She leaned into my touch. And then, finally, there was no space left. Our mouths met, not with hunger or frenzy, but with something deeper, slower, like a tide easing in, testing the shore. Her lips were warm and patient, opening under mine. She tasted like lake water and breath and the tension that had lived in my body for months unspoken. Her towel dropped first, a soft thump against the floor. She stood there, bare and unapologetic, eyes locked on mine, waiting to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. I dropped mine too. For a moment, we just looked at each other, two people no longer hiding from what had already begun before this night ever started. Not just about sex. Not just escape. Something slower burning. Sadder. Real. She reached for my hand, led me to the edge of the small bed. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We laid down together, skin to skin. The air was thick with the weight of what we were about to do, and the ghost of everything we were leaving behind. Her hands moved first, skimming my chest, fingers grazing my ribs. She touched me like I was fragile, like she wasn't sure I wouldn't break. I returned the gesture, brushing my fingertips along her spine, following the curve of her back, the hollow just above her hips. She made a sound, small, caught between a sigh and something more desperate. I kissed her shoulder, her collarbone, the hollow of her throat. She arched beneath me. Time slowed. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't reckless. It was honest. She pulled me closer, and I sank into her like we'd done this before in another life, like my body was remembering hers. The way her breath caught when I entered her, slow and steady. The way her hands tightened on my back. The way she whispered my name like it was something she'd waited to say until it finally meant something. We moved together, not just in rhythm, but in understanding. Every touch a translation. Every breath a confession. And when she came, quiet, back arched, mouth parted, it wasn't explosive. It was intimate, like a lock turning, a door opening. I followed soon after, burying my face in her shoulder, not to muffle a sound, but to ground myself in the feeling of being wanted, of being seen, of being touched like I mattered. After, we lay tangled in the sheets, her head on my chest, one leg draped over mine, our bodies slick with heat and lake water and the kind of closeness that couldn't be undone. The fan ticked overhead. Outside, the lake whispered against the shore. Inside, I felt a calm I hadn't known in months. I didn't think about Dana, not even out of guilt, because the truth was, she wasn't part of this. She'd left the door open. Leah just happened to walk through it. I looked down at her, her fingers tracing lazy patterns along my chest, eyes half-lidded but alert. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't playing a part. She was here. And I realized something that made my breath catch in my throat. I didn't want to leave this room. Not just tonight. Not even tomorrow. I wasn't thinking about consequences or explanations or what would come when this summer ended. All I knew was that for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was surviving my life. I was living it. I reached down, brushing her hair back from her face. She looked up at me. Neither of us smiled. We didn't have to. Because some truths don't need words. They just need skin. I woke up to light cutting through the blinds in soft gold lines, striping the sheets, and painting her bare back. For a second, I didn't move. Not because I was afraid, just the opposite. Because I felt still. Her body lay half on her stomach, hair messy across the pillow, the sheet only barely covering the curve of her hips. One arm tucked beneath her, the other stretched toward me like she'd reached for something in her sleep and never quite found it. Her fingers were inches from my chest. So I reached back. I touched her gently, just where her shoulder met her neck. She stirred but didn't open her eyes. Instead, her hand found mine beneath the sheets and wrapped around it like she'd been waiting for it. And then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, she slid her leg over mine, her skin warm and soft, and still carrying the scent of the lake. I let my eyes close again, but not out of retreat, just to feel it longer. Because there was no guilt here, no panic, no regret, only the realization that something real had happened. Something that had nothing to do with infidelity or revenge or anything Dana and I had broken. Leah moved, slowly. Her lips brushed my chest, and then her voice, quiet, still soaked in sleep, rose between us. I'm not going to pretend I'm not here. I looked at her. She was watching me now, propped on one elbow, hair wild, mouth soft but serious. I'm not going to sneak around, she said, or tiptoe out while everyone's still asleep. I nodded slowly, sitting with her words. I'm not asking you to, I said. Good, she said, easing back down beside me, resting her cheek on my arm. Because I'd rather be something you own than something you hide. That landed harder than I expected. Because it wasn't about pride or ego. It was about worth. She wasn't saying, take me. She was saying, don't make this less than it was. We stayed like that for a while. Quiet, breathing in the warmth of the morning, the way the room still smelled like skin and summer and something we'd both needed more than we'd realized. Eventually, we got up. Separately for now. Just enough distance to give the illusion of normal. She went to the shared bathroom with her towel wrapped around her, and I slipped into my clothes, still damp from the night air. My skin remembered her, even as I zipped my jeans and threw on a shirt. Every part of me felt different now. Not just sexually. Alive. In the kitchen, someone had already made coffee. Her cousin Joe stood by the sink nursing a mug, hair a mess, shirt inside out. He nodded at me like we'd survived something together. I nodded back. No questions. No looks. But I wondered if they'd heard anything. Wondered what the walls had carried through the floorboards. Wondered if my footsteps on the hallway hardwood had sounded like something shifting. Leah came down 10 minutes later in a new shirt and cutoffs, hair tied in a low bun, face flushed but casual. She poured herself a mug without speaking, leaned next to me at the counter. She brushed against me once, just a touch at the hip, but it said everything. And still, no one asked. It wasn't long after that I checked my phone. I'd forgotten it all night, left it face down on the dresser, turned to do not disturb without a second thought. And now, I almost didn't want to look. But curiosity won. There were 3 missed calls from Dana. And 1 message. It was short. I thought you'd pick up. Anyway, hope the trip's okay. No apology. No warmth. Just a vague reminder that she still technically held a claim to me. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally understood why I didn't want to. Because nothing she could say would change the fact that she had stopped showing up long before I did. I slipped the phone back in my pocket and turned to look out the window. Leah was sitting on the deck now, cross-legged with a book open but not reading. Her head was tilted to the sun, eyes closed, soaking it in like she trusted it to do its job. I stepped outside. She glanced up at me, a small smile tugging the edge of her mouth. I sat down beside her, shoulder to shoulder. She leaned her head against mine. And just like that, the morning didn't feel complicated anymore. It felt true. She showed up 2 days later. No warning. No text ahead of time. Just the sound of tires on gravel and the sharp slam of a car door while we were all in the kitchen playing cards. I knew it was her before I even turned around. The silence that fell over the table was instant. Conversation stopped mid-laugh. The lightness sucked out of the room like a sudden storm had cracked open above us. I stood up slowly. Through the window, I saw her getting out of the car, sunglasses still on, overnight bag slung over one shoulder. Dana, my wife. Tan coat over black leggings, face unreadable as she scanned the porch like she didn't expect to be watched. Leah didn't move beside me. Neither did I. I could feel her eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd respond. I didn't touch her, didn't say anything. But when I walked to the door, I did it with the weight of everything that had happened since I arrived. Not with shame, but with clarity. I stepped outside just as Dana reached the top of the stairs. Hey, she said flatly, pulling off her sunglasses. Her eyes flicked over my face, scanning for something. You didn't answer my text. I know, I said. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked past me, into the house, and then back again. So this is where we are. I crossed my arms, not out of defensiveness, just to keep my hands from shaking. You didn't say you were coming, I said. I wanted to talk, she replied. In person, away from everything. That would have made more sense before, I said. Before everything became nothing. She narrowed her eyes, the sharpness coming back now. Is Leah here? I didn't answer. She took that as confirmation. Wow, she muttered. So it's true. What's true? I asked, voice low. She stared at me for a second like she couldn't decide whether to laugh or slap me. You really slept with her? Still, I said nothing. Because the answer wasn't something I needed to explain. Dana's face twisted, not with hurt, but something closer to disbelief. My cousin, Jack? You told me to be with someone else? I said quietly. I didn't mean her. You didn't mean anything, I said. That was the problem. She stepped back, stunned by the calm in my voice. I came up here thinking maybe space would help, I said. But all it did was give me time to see what we'd become. We haven't touched in months. We haven't loved each other in longer. And the one time I asked you if there was anything left between us, you gave me permission to leave. That wasn't permission, she snapped. That was frustration. No, Dana. That was indifference. And you know it. She looked away. I'm not going to stand here and pretend we were fine before this, I continued. We weren't. You stopped showing up. Emotionally. Physically. And I kept waiting for you to notice. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I asked you if you still wanted me, I said. And you shrugged. You didn't fight for us. You didn't even ask why I was hurting. You just handed me off like a coat you didn't want to wear anymore. She didn't argue, didn't deny it. She just crossed her arms tightly, like the words were hitting harder than she expected. And Leah, she asked finally. What? You think this is going somewhere? I paused, not out of doubt, but because the answer felt too big for one sentence. She showed up when I needed a reminder I still existed, I said. And she didn't ask me to hide. Dana scoffed. That's what this is about. Feeling seen? No, I said. This is about feeling alive. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Something you stopped offering long before she ever touched me. Silence again. The wind stirred the trees, the lake calm behind us like it was listening. She looked at me for a long time, then her voice dropped. You didn't even call. Would you have picked up? I asked. She looked away. I let that sit there. I didn't plan for any of this, I said. I didn't come up here looking to fall into someone else's arms. But the minute you gave me that sentence, be with someone else, something in me broke. She nodded, slowly, like she was starting to understand. I don't hate you, I said softly. But I can't pretend this marriage still has something in it to fight for. And Leah, she asked again, not snide this time. Is she the reason it's over? I shook my head. No, you were. She's just the reason I finally saw it. Dana's mouth parted slightly, like she had something else to say. But the words didn't come. She just looked at me. And for the first time in months, I didn't look away. I turned and walked back inside without asking if she wanted help with her bag. Leah was still in the kitchen. She didn't ask what was said. She didn't need to. She just stood there, waiting, her hands resting on the counter, her expression open. Solid. I walked up behind her, brushed my hand lightly across her back. She leaned into it. And for the first time, I didn't carry the weight alone. Dana didn't stay long. She made it through one dinner, sitting stiff-backed at the end of the table, while conversations ebbed and flowed around her like she wasn't part of them. She smiled when spoken to. She answered questions. But she was somewhere else entirely, behind her eyes. I didn't sit beside her. Leah didn't avoid her, but she didn't seek her out either. They shared one polite exchange over coffee, and that was it. The next morning, Dana left before breakfast. Said she had work. Said the weather was turning. Said nothing about us. And that was fine. Because by then, I had stopped looking for signals from her. Whatever needed to be said had been said. I didn't need a scene. I didn't need closure that would only reopen what we'd already bled dry. After she was gone, Leah didn't press. She gave me space. Quiet space. Not distance, not coldness. Just a gentle kind of room to process without pressure. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask what I needed. She trusted that if I needed her, I'd come find her. And I did. We ended up back at the dock that evening, the sky smeared with gold and rust, the lake glassy and unbothered. No one else was around. The others had gone into town for supplies. The silence was ours. Leah dangled her legs over the edge, toes skimming the water. She wore a simple sundress, the straps thin and slipping, her hair windblown and unstyled. She didn't look like someone trying to impress anyone. She looked real. Do you feel lighter? She asked, eyes still on the lake. Somehow, yeah. She nodded like she understood. I always thought ending something would feel like falling. But sometimes it feels like taking your first breath after forgetting to breathe for too long. That's exactly what it feels like, I said, voice low. She glanced at me, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I meant what I said the other night, she said. I'm not going to be something you hide. You're not, I said. Even if things get messy, she asked. They already are. She laughed softly, then looked back out over the water. I leaned in, brushing my shoulder against hers. And it hit me, not as a shock, not as lust, but as clarity. This isn't just about sex. It never was. Leah was warmth, consistency, truth without filters. She didn't demand anything from me, but somehow made me want to give everything anyway. What happens after the summer? I asked. She turned to me slowly. I don't know, she said. But I won't chase you. And I won't pretend this didn't mean something. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a request. Just honesty. I reached over and took her hand. I'm not going back to a cold bed, I said. Or cold hands. Or conversations that feel like interviews. Her thumb traced the back of my knuckle. I didn't cheat on Dana, I said, voice barely above a whisper. I just stopped waiting for her to notice she left. Leah didn't respond right away. Then, you chose heat over habit. I looked at her. That phrase landed with weight and precision. You think that makes me selfish? I asked. She met my gaze fully. No, she said. I think it makes you human. The wind shifted slightly. A few leaves fell onto the dock, brushing against our feet. I let the silence stretch, feeling it wrap around us. Not like a wall, but like a blanket. I didn't think I could still feel like this, I admitted. Like what? Like I matter to someone. Like my body isn't just background noise. Like touch can be more than obligation. Leah moved then, slowly, until her body leaned against mine. She rested her head on my shoulder, our fingers still locked. We sat there as the sun dipped, the light around us dimming into something quieter. A softer truth. One that didn't need explanations or justifications. Eventually, she said, this wasn't about revenge. No, I agreed. This was about reminder. Exactly. She kissed my shoulder. A small thing, barely a whisper of skin, but it grounded me more than any speech could have. I thought about the word affair, how heavy it felt, how easily it was thrown around to describe something forbidden, something ugly. But this didn't feel like an affair. It felt like a reawakening. Leah wasn't a mistake. She was the moment I stopped surviving and started feeling again. And I knew then, without doubt, I wasn't going back. Not to guilt, not to cold sheets, not to a marriage that had become a memory long before either of us admitted it. The trip ended like they always do, slowly at first, then all at once. Cooler lids slammed shut. Folding chairs disappeared into trunks. Leftovers got packed into mismatched Tupperware, and the fire pit was doused with a hiss that sounded like some final exhale. People hugged tighter than usual this year. I think some of them felt it, even if they didn't say it, that something had shifted, not just for me, but in the rhythm of the family, in what this place had become. I stood at the edge of the driveway beside my car, watching others pull away one by one, the crunch of gravel under tires giving way to silence. Leah stood next to me, her fingers laced loosely with mine. No one had asked about us, not directly, but people noticed. You could see it in the way her aunt smiled a little longer when she said goodbye, or how her cousin Joe clapped my shoulder without saying a word. Some truths don't need to be declared to be understood. You staying another night? She asked softly, her voice touched with sun and endings. Yeah, I said. One more. She nodded. Me too. We didn't talk about what came after. Not yet. Instead, we went back inside and made coffee like it was morning again, like the house hadn't already emptied itself of noise and chaos and distraction. It was just us now. The leftovers. The ones not rushing back to anything urgent. After coffee, we stripped the sheets from the beds, folded towels, swept sand out of corners. We moved around each other like we'd done it 100 times before. And maybe we had, in another life. One where we didn't have to justify what we were to anyone, not even ourselves. In the afternoon, we walked down to the dock one last time. The lake looked different now. Not worse. Just quieter. The kind of quiet that comes after a crowd leaves, when the air settles and the birds return to the branches. We sat side by side again, toes brushing the water. She leaned her head on my shoulder. You ready to go back? She asked. Not really, I admitted. What are you going back to? I thought about that longer than I expected to. Not a marriage, I said. That's done. Officially or not. She nodded but didn't press. I think I'm going back to me. I added. Or whoever I used to be before I shrank myself down to fit what she wanted. Leah turned toward me, her eyes soft but steady. You don't have to know everything right now, she said. Just don't pretend it didn't happen. I'm not, I said. I couldn't. She leaned in, kissed me, slow, deliberate, not urgent. When she pulled back, she said, You know, some summers are just memories. I raised an eyebrow. And some rewrite everything. We stayed on the dock until the light began to change. That golden hour glow where everything feels too perfect to last. And maybe that's the point, it doesn't. It's not supposed to. By the time we went back inside, the house felt less like a place we were leaving and more like a place we'd outgrown. That night, we didn't undress in a rush. We didn't fall into each other like escapees. We touched slowly, without the urgency of stolen time. It wasn't an affair anymore. It was something formed from the ash of everything else. Afterward, we lay tangled in the half-dark, our legs a mess beneath the sheets, the window cracked open to let in the sound of crickets. What now? I asked her. She didn't pretend to know. Instead, she kissed my chest and said, Now we see what this was. If it ends here, or starts here. I held her a little tighter. Because deep down, I already knew. This wasn't the end. The next morning, we packed up the last of the food, turned off the main breaker, locked the back door. I watched Leah toss her bag into her car. She turned and looked at me over the roof, the wind pushing her hair into her mouth. She didn't fix it. Drive safe, I said. You too. A pause. Then call me. I smiled. Count on it. She nodded once, then slid into the driver's seat. I stood there until her taillights vanished down the hill, then got into my car and turned the key. As the engine hummed to life, I looked back at the lake one last time. It didn't look like a place I'd been. It looked like a place where something began.